occupancy at nearly 96%, and annual rent growth approaching the 5% mark. That sounds like really good news, right? Well, it probably would be in all but one spot, Washington, D.C. Welcome to Apartment Market Dynamics from MPF Research. I'm Jay Parsons, and I'm joined by D.C.'s leading pundit, Greg Willett. So Greg, we need to look at some numbers here. Let's start with the basic stats. Overall occupancy in DC as of 3Q is at 95.8%, and occupancy has been around that 95 to 96 mark for 7 straight quarters, and rents, effective rents in the market went up 1.6% specifically in the past quarter, and the annual growth rate is now at 4.6%. So Greg, those are pretty good numbers, but we're hearing that a lot of people aren't very happy with that. So what's going on? Why aren't people very happy?
We are hearing a little bit of concern about what's happening with DC from the operators. And while those are good numbers, there is some loss of momentum. And particularly when we look at the rent side, what we see is rents are still going up, but every quarter the 3-month growth number is a little bit below what it was 12 months earlier. And so that means that the annual rent growth pace is slowing down a little bit. Calendar 2010, you had rent growth that was getting up close to 5.5%, 6%. So we are off about 1 percentage point from where we were at the end of last year. And then also some significant slowdown in the demand numbers for DC. Only about 620 units absorbed specifically during third quarter. Year-ending third quarter, I believe the absorption number was 2,560 units, so not a fantastic demand story.
So apartment demand is slowing down. We'll put a chart on the screen showing annual apartment demand by quarter, and as Greg mentioned, just over 2,500 units absorbed in the year ending September. And by comparison, in the preceding 12 months, the year ending September 2010, that number was at 16,000. Now, part of that drop-off is because new supply levels plunged at the same time, and DC is a market that has a strong correlation between new supply and demand. And also, the market is more full than it was relative to 2 years ago when the demand streak started to trend upward. So is it that simple? There's less supply, and relative to 2 years ago, fewer vacancies? Or is there a more fundamental issue here in the apartment demand story?
And I think the answer there is both. And certainly the fact that there's less new supply coming on stream does come into play. And as we talk to developers out there, the properties that are in initial lease up right now are doing incredibly well and typically are actually outperforming what had been pro forma'd for those properties. So that segment is doing well, but there aren't a whole lot of those properties to feed into demand. But some underlying concerns about the DC economy are starting to show up right now, and you can't ignore that maybe that's a factor in this demand slowdown. If you go back to February of this year, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, DC was producing about 70,000 jobs annually, right up there with Texas markets and Boston at the very top of the charts. In contrast, as of August, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that annual growth was at 100 jobs. I mean, virtually nothing. And it's not a situation where there's some cutbacks on the government sector that are countering some good growth in private industry. In fact, every major industry category is right at zero for annual change in employment.
So given all that, should we be worried about DC?
There is some concern that certainly is there. Our overall outlook is for a really healthy but not spectacular performance moving ahead. In addition to that job number, the other one I would point out to watch for is the construction number. And right now, 5,000 to 6,000 units under construction. That's not especially aggressive, but tons of product in the planning stages, and we could easily see that number go back to its previous peak of 8,000 to 9,000 units. And if you sustain that for 2, 3, 4 years on the delivery side, then yeah, DC could struggle.
And one more factor for you, I hear there's a presidential election next year.
I've heard something about that myself.
Could that play any factor at all in the apartment market?
Well, actually it could, and every time you have an administration change, you see some new folks coming in to work in jobs for a change in party. At the same time, the people who have been there don't necessarily leave. They go to work for lobbying groups or other private industry firms that have some connection to the government, and And so that really actually does help the DC housing market. So it's probably better for the local apartment market if a Republican wins in 2012, but I don't think that needs to be the criteria we're using for deciding who to vote for.
All right, so there's some expertise analysis again from DC's leading pundit. So that wraps us up for Washington, D.C. For Greg Willett, I'm Jay Parsons. Thank you for watching Apartment Market Dynamics.
Want more? Go deeper with MPF Research's apartment market reports. From a national level, down to individual metros, to specific neighborhoods, MPF Research has been providing unparalleled apartment market intelligence to the multifamily industry for almost 5 decades. Learn more by contacting us at 877-284-4938 or visit www.npfresearch.com and click on Market Reports.